Okay, so if I say macaroni and cheese, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably that box you used to eat as a kid. You might still have them now, right in the cabinet. I'm telling you, today's the day you're gonna throw those out. I'm gonna show you a mac and cheese that will be the hit of every family meal, holiday, and gathering. And it is homemade easy. Just watch. Okay, home cooks, so I've pre-measured a lot of the ingredients for this, and one thing you've probably heard several times from people is less is more. So I want to keep my creamy mac and cheese down to as simple of a recipe as possible, because when you start adding all these extra things, you're probably going to miss something, or one of the flavors isn't going to come through. So in front of me here, you're going to see everything that we're going to use today. So I've got a stick of butter, got a pound of pasta. I went with a cool little pipette pasta instead of shells or elbows, because that's what everybody else would use. I've got a half a cup of flour. Now bear in mind, we've taught this before, anytime you're working with a dry ingredient, use a butter knife, drag across, and make sure that it's an exact measurement. Flour is a very unforgiving item when you're putting it into a cream sauce. It could over thicken, and then you're rallying to try and bring that back to a normal consistency. Over here I've got 4 cups of whole milk. We use whole milk instead of skim or low fat because this has 4% milk fat. We're making a creamy mac and cheese, not a low-calorie mac and cheese. So anybody on a diet, I apologize, this is not for you. And in here, I've shredded 8 ounces of sharp yellow cheddar and 8 ounces of Gruyere cheese. Some recipes online call for cheddar and then they say Parmesan. The problem with Parmesan is it leaves a gritty note to it because unfortunately that's just the way that that cheese melts. Here, these are freshly shredded because, as we've mentioned in the past, pre-shredded cheeses that come in a package do have anti-caking agents, which again will leave a gritty note. So by doing this yourself, you're going to ensure you're going to have the creamiest, smoothest, most delicious mac and cheese your family has ever tried. I'll meet you over at the stove in just 1 second. Okay, I'm over at the stove and I've got a quick pop quiz for you. I've got water over here heating up. It's at a light simmer. We're going to add salt because we never want to use just plain water. We want our water to be seasoned. But when do you add it? Go ahead and answer that for me. Okay, you know I can't hear you. But the idea is you have to let it come to a full boil first and then add your salt. Boil is 212 degrees. I'm sure you learned that in science class. If you add salt too early, what it does is it actually raises the boiling temperature, not only seasoning the water. So then it takes longer to come to a full boil. So let the natural water come to a boil first, then add your salt to season the water and let it continue to boil. That will save you some time. Okay, so the water is heating up. I've got my milk over here. I'm going to get that started as well in a separate saucepan. And the idea is put this in a medium heat. We want to get this hot, but we do not want to bring it to a boil. And one of the reasons we want to get it hot is when we incorporate it into this other pan, and I'll show you that in a minute, you don't want to put cold milk in there. It's going to stop everything from cooking, and you're going to be like, oh my gosh, this is going to take forever. Again, we're working smart, we're making it homemade easy, so let's make it easy on ourselves. So in a large saucepan over here, I'm going to go ahead and fire this up. I'm going to put in my stick of butter, and I'm going to let that melt. We're going to add the flour to that here in just a minute, and the idea is we're going to create a roux. Now, if you've ever watched any Cajun cooking or anything where a roux is required, you're going to find that they want to toast it and brown it, and the more brown you get, the better the flavor. For a creamy mac and cheese, that is not what we're doing. We want to create a roux that will thicken our sauce. So we're creating like a bechamel sauce with the milk and the roux, but we want to cook the flour. That is the entire intention, and that is all. So once it starts to change color slightly, we're going to start incorporating the milk. We do not want to cook it into color. Be sure of that. Okay, so I'm adding the flour to the pan with the melted butter, and I'm using a wide saucepan, something that I feel is going to give us the best opportunity to not only see how the roux cooks with a large surface area, but I'm going to make this the finishing pan for it. You're going to say to me, well, wait a minute, don't you put it in a casserole and throw it in the oven? I am of the understanding that casseroles are where good food goes to die. Doesn't mean that Aunt Betsy's mac and cheese that she brought to every family dinner when you were growing up was a bad thing, but what I'm trying to do is give you something that you can go right from the stove to a plate and make everybody happy. So I'm going to keep stirring this here for just a few minutes, and we will be right back. All right, a couple things going on here. This is our roux base now just bubbling away. You stir it often. You want to make sure you don't get any brown or dark spots in there because, again, that'll show up in the finished product. Pasta has been added to the water. I turn it down to medium-high. If you've ever had a boil over on your stove, you're going to know exactly what that looks like. And then our milk's got just some nice bubbles along the side. Again, we're avoiding any type of a boil up because we don't want to scorch the milk. And once it boils, by golly, that stuff's going to go everywhere. So We are going to add that to our roux here in just a second. Okay, we're getting ready to add the milk to the roux mixture, and I know we've got a lot of things going on here. Make sure you're stirring your pasta regularly in those early several minutes because you don't want it to all stick together. You will not get an even cook if you allow it to stick together. These pipettes are nice and small, but if they clump together, it's it. Somebody's going to get a bite of something you do not want them to have. So we're going to go ahead and start incorporating our milk. Now I've pulled out a whisk, and you could still use the rubber spatula that I was using to stir the roux, but what I'm trying to do is get to a creamy point quick. And by using this, we're going to break down a lot of the flour and the butter into the milk and allow a better incorporation. Now we do want to keep that down. I've got it on a 4 right now, and you can hear the sizzle in the background. It's reacting with the milk, but that's a good thing. It's going to get really thick, really fast, so we want to be ready to continuously add milk. We just don't want to shock it and add it all at once, or we're going to get lumps and clumps, and that's never going to taste good. So you can see the roux is really thick now. We're going to continue to add milk because, of course, we want to make sure that this is a bechamel sauce and not a bechamel paste. So if you look, we have a very mashed potato-like consistency, and I've been beating the lumps out of it with the whisk. We're going to do that for just another couple of seconds here, and then we're going to add the rest of that milk. Our pasta's nearly done cooking, which is always a good sign. But as I pan over here, this is really what you want to see. That is our bechamel sauce just bubbling away. You're going to notice that it's got a very thick, bright white consistency. We will not add black pepper or anything to it that's going to change that color. The only thing going in next is going to be the cheese. But just to let you see, this is very thick, very creamy as it is right now. We want to give it a couple of minutes to just really cook together before we add the cheese. Okay, give it one last vigorous whisk just to make sure you don't have any hot spots or anything sticking in here. And again, super rich, super creamy. And then turn your burner down to the lowest setting. When you incorporate cheese in here, you want to make sure that it's going to mix and stay creamy. Unfortunately, if this is too hot, it's going to break the cheese down and you're going to get an oily residue, you're going to get a gritty residue, and unfortunately, in the finished product, it's not going to be very good. Then we want to add cheese about a handful at a time. And again, the idea, just like when we were adding the milk, we don't want to shock what we're doing and add too much of something and have clumps or have anything really just not incorporate well. We're going to go ahead and add some more. We'll be doing this for a couple of minutes, so don't feel like if it's taking you too long, you're in trouble. This is exactly what you're supposed to do. So I brought you in close to the pan so you can see this is the consistency that we're going for. Super thick, super cheesy. If you've ever gone out for fondue, you'll know exactly what this looks like. And Gruyere is one of those cheeses used in fondue. People like to use Swiss, but Swiss doesn't melt very well. Gruyere is a similar cheese that melts well and adds a little nutty character. So that's why, of course, we're using it here. So off to the left here, I've already drained the pasta. You can see it's still steaming, which means I do not rinse to cool down my pasta. There's no reason for that. We want the starch that's still on there to be there when it goes into the cheese sauce. But I also put the pan right back under the colander to catch any of the extra liquid. That pasta water is the great adjuster, in my opinion. If you're taking this on the road to go visit grandma or go to Easter or some dinner, you're going to want to add a little of that pasta water because the pasta will continue to cook, which means it's going to continue to soak up liquid. And we don't want to get there and have it all seized up. So we're going to make it a little bit runnier if we need to take it on the road. Okay, what we're going to do now is not rocket science. I've got this great cheesy sauce, and we are going to start adding our pasta. Now, unlike the other ingredients, you can just drop that right in. We're going to move the colander off to the side, and then we're just going to slowly incorporate. Now, pipettes have a space on the inside, so we want to make sure that we stir, but stir lightly. We don't want to break the pasta because then when you put it in a bowl, they're not going to be pretty. I mean, we picked a cool pasta for a reason. We want it to show up well in a dish. But you want some of this cheese sauce to find its way into those nooks and crannies of the pasta. So when you bite into it, you don't get a pocket of air, but you get a pocket of cheesy, good, delicious macaroni and cheese. Okay, the heat is off. The macaroni is incorporated. Probably about 4 or 5 minutes of stirring just to make sure everything's in there nicely. You'll notice it's thick, it's creamy, it sticks together, but it's not stringy, which means that we did a proper job getting the the bechamel sauce and the cheese and the pasta and everything to come together nicely. So this is where I would normally serve it from. But for those of you that like to stick it in the oven, I've got a little bonus footage here for you that you're gonna really appreciate. Okay, so baked mac and cheese typically has some kind of a crust on top, and most people put breadcrumbs. But again, what we're trying to do is avoid putting the mac and cheese in the oven. So what I'm doing is toasting some panko breadcrumbs in a hot skillet. So I've got a tablespoon of olive oil, and you can see the oil is moving around really nicely, so it's well heated up. We want to keep that on a medium-high heat, and we're going to go ahead and add 1 cup of panko breadcrumbs. Panko are preferable because the size and the nature of them, they toast up nicely. They're not like those other seasoned breadcrumbs that sometimes are in very small, fine bits. We want something that's going to have a little mouthfeel and some bite, and then hopefully it's going to crunch up. I personally add just a dash of garlic powder, and then a couple of nice, generous grinds of salt and pepper. We're going to taste it afterwards to make sure, but we know that this is going to be one of the features on top of the dish, and so we want it to be well seasoned. And then you're just going to slowly work around and incorporate your breadcrumbs for probably 4 or 5 minutes. You're looking for a little toast color. You can hear a little bit of a pop in the background, and then these are going to look great on top of the dish. So I'll see you back here in just 1 second. So what you're going to notice is it doesn't take very long for panko breadcrumbs to go from looking like this to looking like this. Okay, so how do you take this and make it look like you put it in the oven without ruining it? Well, very simply, you do what I just showed you. You toast some panko breadcrumbs, sprinkle them around the top, and they've got a nice crunch to them. We added a little bit of seasoning while they were cooking, so we don't have to add anything to the top of this other than just a little parsley. So this is how you make great, creamy mac and cheese for any family gathering, and you don't have to put it in the oven. Enjoy. So as I get ready to dig in, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Don't tell your Aunt Betty I told her this is the recipe she should have been bringing to family dinners, but if you send it to her by accident, maybe she'll try it the next time she comes over. But either way, if you make it, make sure you tag The Bearded Home Cook on all of your social media channels. Make sure you hit our website, thebeardedhomecook.com, for the full recipe and photographs of this. And by all means, enjoy it. It's great, it's delicious, it's family friendly, and it's really cheap on the budget. Have a great day. See you next time.